All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Field Pass Podcast. We are officially in Wild Card Weekend, approaching the end here of the entirety of the NFL season. So we're really excited to just be able to bring you the storylines coming in these couple games. It feels like uh, the way that the cards fell was perfect for some of the NFL storylines that we've seen. We see Stafford finally going back to Detroit to potentially knock his original team out of the playoffs. You have CJ Stroud on an upward trajectory against the Browns, trying to get a win when we punch them in the mouth back in Houston. And then additionally, some of the things that I think we're going to talk about today is more so about who isn't in the playoffs and who weren't snubbed, because that's not how this works. This isn't college football. Um, they collapsed. They either collapsed or they just weren't good outright. It may have resulted in a coaching change, or they're just gearing up for another crappy season going into the next season. But nonetheless, it's a really exciting time to be a fan of NFL football right now. And why don't we start off with our first headline, which is the Buffalo Bills winning the AFC East, which was surprising to me. I don't know if you guys remember from last week, but I predicted them not to make the playoffs at all, which is something that is a stain on my predictive capabilities. But it kind of didn't end up going in the way that I anticipated it going. Although they did beat Miami, which was something I didn't necessarily expect. They didn't even get in necessarily because of that. They initially got in because Pittsburgh ended up winning, and that's what qualified. No, 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 that wasn't it. The Jags lost, which was I think even bigger than that. What do you think about the Bills winning the East, Braden? How big of a threat do you think they are in the playoffs?
Oh, they're a huge threat. I mean, they were 6-6 after the Eagles loss, and now they're 11-6. This is a little sidetrack, but the Eagles are now 11-6, which we can talk about later. But they're Josh Allen didn't have the best performance Sunday night. I mean, he threw a couple like that. Pat McAfee described I forget if it was the first or the second
It
interception
was the
where
second one.
yeah, he said that was like you're trying to lose your job type deal. Like that's the way Pat McAfee put it. But even though Josh Allen didn't play the greatest and he made mistakes, they made plays when it mattered. They got the job done in Miami, which I feel like they have handled Miami these past couple years. Other than the one win Miami had last year, I feel like it's been all Buffalo. Like ever since the Bills have ruled the AFC East. And I mean, I don't think if you had told us after that Eagles game that they would go out and win the division, me and you would have there would have been we would have started laughing at you, I feel like. So I feel like this needs to get the recognition it deserves for the run they just went on. And I mean they're rolling into the playoffs. They have a favorable matchup this week in Pittsburgh, so I think they're not going to stop here. So I mean they're going to keep rolling. I mean, your Brownies may end up having to go there, so we'll see.
Here's the thing, and I don't want to talk bad, or I don't want to like charge any team that I don't have to face in the playoffs with like fraudulent status or anything like that. Because I know that that'll be clipped and come back to bite me, but I can say things about them while being respectful about it. Um, and the reason I'm prefacing that is because I'm not about to be very nice to the Buffalo Bills. I think that they're not very good. I think that they are actually they're kind of gilded in the way that and if you've been listening to the podcast, you know how I feel about Josh Allen. Like I'm big into analytics and the science that's behind this sport, and everyone loves Josh Allen just because of when he's good. But when he makes those mistakes, they end up being the death of him. Like basically, you live and die by Josh Allen, and I just don't like that. Um, I just think it really it put them in the situation in which at the start of the season when they were on that downward trajectory, when you did lose to Denver back when they were still like pretty miserable, like they granted they had gotten like better after that 70-point loss to the Dolphins. Uh, he has gotten better. He has been playing at a higher standard. I think he's like second highest in terms of like just general quarterback statistics. I still don't believe it. It feels like 75% of the time that this team is on the field, or at least the offense, they're playing lethargic. You barely won against Easton Stick. You nearly lost to Bailey Zappi, who gave away, what was it, 4 turnovers in the first quarter or something like that. It had to be at least the first half. And I don't even think they looked that impressive against the Dolphins, who are basically a hospital ward. You have have Tyreek Hill who can't make these catches in big games and who like for some reason is clearly struggling with being able to make these important catches, and it still feels like they were struggling to put them away at times. And I don't see this necessarily being a team that I treat with necessarily much fear, but it may just be because there are people within the AFC, sorry, not AFC North, the AFC playoff. Maybe they're just not as good. Like that is that a possibility? Because I don't feel great about the Steelers. Um, I don't necessarily feel like super confident in. Well, I do feel confident in the Texans. I don't feel confident in the Chiefs. Um, I do trust my Browns, and then obviously, um, but even then you have the Dolphins who are also incredibly injured as well. So it's like, is it? I guess this team is a threat, but it seems like a relative thing. It doesn't seem like this team is absolutely filled with dogs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The only counter to Josh Allen is yes, he hasn't played the greatest. They've still won. And I
That's
guess,
true. Yeah, that's
but
true.
so like what happens if he doesn't throw an interception? Maybe they win by double digits instead of one possession. So, and I think Josh Allen will play better in the playoffs. I think that's just a
I
given.
agree. Yeah.
He usually does. I mean, he's not thrown three interceptions in the playoff. At least he hasn't yet.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, the Chiefs, the most memorable playoff game of his career is the one he lost against the Chiefs, and he was outstanding that game. It
Hmm.
was the defense that sold him at the end. So the fact that the defense is able to still hold up, even though Josh Allen isn't playing good, is a good sign for Buffalo because Josh Allen usually turns up around this time of the year. But I do agree with you that Josh Allen needs to turn up at the same time. Like he needs to
Yeah.
show up for them to win some of these games. I think we both agree that the Steelers is lacking offense. They have a great defense, even though TJ Watt's out, but their offense has they've picked up a little bit with Mason Rudolph, but I mean it's nothing too much. But that's more for the game. I think this week could be like a tune-up game, but especially in the divisional and the championship, and if they get to the Super Bowl, if they get that far, Josh Allen and this offense needs to put up points. I mean, 21 points ain't gonna do it for them, but so I think they have a week. I wouldn't say like you can take this week off, but you're not gonna need to put up 40 points to beat the Steelers team. They're not gonna go in a shootout with them. So I think the Bills they need to tune it up, but I think this is a very favorable matchup for them. But moving on to another win and get in game with Colts and Texans, and the Colts literally dropping their playoff spot in their hands. Now I do feel, but I can't think of the running back's name. I feel bad for him because I mean it was a little behind him, but and he's not really a wide receiver, but it hit him right in the hands, and he could have got there. But regardless, the Texans outlast the Colts and end up and sealing their playoff spot. And I think CJ Stroud has not missed a beat, man. I mean, first play out of the gate, 75-yard bomb, perfect throw to Nico Collins, drops her in, and I mean this team that they can make some noise. Now they got a hard matchup this week, but which I am looking ahead. But they can make some noise. They have the talent to do it, which we didn't really think at the beginning of the year. If you'd have told me they would have won their division, I would have. I would. There's no way. There's the Jags, Titans, and Colts, who I thought. I mean, other than the Colts, you definitely thought the Jags and Titans would do better than them.
Well, there's also, I mean, there was an Anthony Richardson comp like aspect of that, which that was they were also kind of completely unknown. You could have told me they would have been, they kind of I feel like had the same potential as the Texans, which is kind of how it ended up being. Um, even without losing Anthony, even sorry, with losing
Yeah,
Anthony
because
Richardson.
I think what people have been quick to forget is Anthony Richardson was making good strides too.
Yes, he was very good.
He
He was, yeah,
he was I would say he was even with CJ Stroud at the time. Now I think CJ would have separated himself a little
yeah,
bit because I don't think
probably.
Richardson would have been held a string of games. But like if you look week by week when they were playing, they were similar, and Anthony Richardson killed them week 2. So that was a big loss, and the Colts will be back. But I think this Texans team they're interesting, and they do go up against you this week. So, but just give us your perspective on how they got the like how impressed were you that they got that job done and they won their division at the end of the
Yeah.
season?
I wouldn't say I was super impressed with the game itself with the Colts because the Colts are they're a tough team in the sense that they're really well coached, like Shane Steichen. You kind of felt like this game was like the who was going to still be in consideration for Coach of the Year. After the outcome of this game was going to determine that, and that's just kind of the way it is. D'Amico Ryan is still the one that's hanging around because he won. Um, but and I wouldn't say I was super impressed with the Texans as a team necessarily. Um, Not that they were bad or anything. Like they had a great game. Nico Collins in particular. I don't know if he's making all those catches in the ways that he did in playoffs, but if he is going to continue to do that, he's going to be the most dangerous receiver in the playoffs. I don't I wouldn't necessarily be confident that he would be able to do that, especially with kind of a porous Indianapolis secondary and defense as the year has gone on. And he started out, I felt like kind of in a hot streak, and they've kind of tempered out as it's gone forward. Gone forward. I don't think that you're necessarily making those throws against kind of more of a defined secondary. I'm not certain on that, but I don't. It's much less likely. But I'm just more impressed with the team, man. With the way that they've been able to overcome um, just getting down earlier in the year and then having to adapt to not necessarily just get used to having a rookie quarterback. I feel like from the top to the bottom, D'Amico Ryan has done a great job of using the pieces that he's had. Drafting Tank Dell was a awesome decision, and a lot of this does come back to Stroud and just him being able to be just completely dangerous in the pocket when it's breaking down and when it's completely built up and showing up when you needed him to. Like there are a number of just completely amazing game-winning drives that we've seen from Stroud, and I think he's still going to be dangerous. He's certainly going to be dangerous going forward. I think it was in terms of passing yards and his incompletion percent. Sorry, his turnover percentage, his interception thrown. He was right up there with I think Joe Montana and Brady with the way that he's been throwing in terms of his passing yards and his interception record. So that's good company to be with, to say the least. So they're really scary, and I'm really upset. Like I tweeted out like making it very clear that there's nothing more in my heart that I feel towards a particular team in the NFL other than the Browns, than hate I have for Jacksonville right now for just completely collapsing and allowing Mike Vrabel to destroy your season. I hate you guys for what you did and making me stressed out for the rest of this week because I wouldn't be feeling this way. Uh, if you guys had just managed to get it together. But yeah, that sucked for me.
Yeah, and Zach pretty much moved on to our next, which is Jacksonville's choke job in Tennessee. And man, this team fell apart. Like they were 8-3, and even after they lost to the Bengals that Monday night, I don't think either we thought it was a problem that they lost, but I don't think it was like we didn't think they would fall this far and out of the playoffs. All they had to win two of the next games, and their one game they won was with C.J. Beathard at the
Yeah.
quarterback, not Trevor Lawrence. So I think you got to start this problem with the quarterback, man. I mean, the Trevor Lawrence needs to do better. That's flat out. I mean, I think it was the fourth down he missed a throw late in the game. Or it was a crucial down. I don't know if it was fourth. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but Trevor Lawrence needs to be better, and I think the offense needs to be better, and I think it really Christian Kirk being gone really hurt them.
Yeah, that seems to be the catalyst for this collapse. And it's not like Christian Kirk was necessarily like this now he's great. I think Christian Kirk is still very underrated. Like granted,
Yes.
with the way that we talk about wide receivers, if you know anyone who's worth their stones and is talking about it, they're going to recognize that Christian Kirk is like a solid wide receiver. People were really mocking the contract that he got because it seemed like a really massive overpay. But it ended up actually being an incredible addition to the team and that justified the contract. What I will say is that, yeah, that does seem to be like the catalyst for the collapse. But like you said, Braden, there could have been much better quarterback play. I know this he was coming off an injury when he played the Browns, but the way that he was throwing some of those, I think he threw three interceptions in that game, and genuinely like throughout half of the throws that he was actually chucking up, it looked like he was playing fly with our defense instead of actually trying to throw it directly to
Yeah.
one of his receivers. And it ended up being like that. And they ended up losing that game. And it was close, but it's you. I think you really have to put that fully on Trevor. And we don't necessarily know what his body feels like. We don't know how he's feeling right now, but it appears that he's playing through something. And we had talked about this before when we were trying to evaluate whether or not he was going to play in that game against Cleveland, and we were calling it stupid for doing so. And I don't know if that's had any remedial effects or anything like that, but if so, they got to get that figured out over this offseason because that's what ended up shipping Baker out of town with Cleveland.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, I don't think they move on from him in the offseason. I think he's way too young and he's
Yeah,
shown a lot of promise, but I mean, he definitely needs to improve, especially this final stretch. But I mean, yeah, Tennessee, because I mean, Ryan Tannehill was starting, it wasn't Will Levis.
I think that had to
So,
do with injuries. Yeah,
yeah, because Will Levis was
yeah.
hurt from the week before.
Hmm.
But it was right there for Jacksonville, and they just blew it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how your frustration, and I think Jags fans are frustrated because they lost to a Tennessee team that like really had not looked good in weeks.
No, and
And
I had talked about how they were the Saints of the AFC North, sorry, the AFC just generally, and it ended up being that way, and they ended up syncing up together because the Saints looked pretty killer as well against the Falcons. So I guess they both just figured it out this week.
yeah,
The two moons aligned, and we we saw one incident in which the the Jaguars completely fell apart, and I think you not necessarily Doug Peterson's job is in question, but maybe it should be. And then Dennis Allen just completely well, I guess it was more so Jameis Winston
yeah,
with that call just completely torpedoed Arthur Smith's career as well. So it's like my two wild cards really wild carded it up this week.
yeah. But there's one team left that was a win-and-in situation, and it was actually the defense that got it done. In the Packers, they win. It was a low-scoring game. Lower. I thought this would be in the 30s with the week the Packers had in Minnesota, and then the Bears offense rolling, and then it's 17-9. And I mean, me and you know some Packers fans, they're obviously happy, but I think, oh, what's the defensive coordinator?
Joe Barry.
Yeah, Joel Berry. He was fighting for his life, and I mean, he showed up when it mattered. It showed up when it mattered, and they got the job done. They're in the playoffs, and they looked. We said that they could easily make the playoffs after the Chiefs win. Then they dropped two straight and was like, wait a minute, they're gonna miss the playoffs, and then they come back up and get in the playoffs as a seventh seed. So, Zach, what do you think of Green Bay's performance?
I was impressed with it. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not this is something that will carry over into the playoffs because I feel like this is a really weird game to end the season on, or like kind of evaluate what Green Bay will look like going forward. They did look solid in their showing before, but I guess it comes out to being and the reason why I'm saying that is because the Bears Packers rivalry is so storied and the Packers have been owning them for so long that it doesn't even appear like I'm sort of trying to understand if this game was more so an extension of the Packers just completely dominating the Bears and them probably not going to be able to beat the Bears for the next like 2 years or anything like that, barring any like Caleb Williams magic. It just feels like they have them figured out. It sometimes it feels like they are teams that in terms of like an organizational level know how to handle the other team despite what they look like. And I'm not sure if we should necessarily evaluate the Packers like that, like they're necessarily this like amazing team going into the playoffs, especially with the defensive concerns. And I think that it can kind of become a fool's gold situation if you think that the fact that Chicago didn't put up as many points as they did on the Packers seems that they means that they kind of figured it out. Um, Granted, when the Bears offense was rolling, we saw that against the Commanders, they were rolling. Now, I would say that even with Joe Barry not being let's at least call him a top vetted defensive coordinator in the NFL, I'm sure my Packers friends would put it a little bit more strongly. Um, I think that the fact that they did hold them to the score that it did, sorry, the score that it was, it's something to have. But I wonder if it's almost like, yeah, why are we even talking about this game? The Packers just have their number. Because, but I mean, and I'm not going to act like they're not a threat because Jordan Love has really been putting it together, and really with like some like the relatively low profile wide receiver talent that he has. But it's been working. I mean, he has one of the higher, he's like in the top echelon of passing yards for the entire league. And I mean, if you're a Packers fan, you should be encouraged. It's just really tough matchup against the Cowboys, who are really going to test test Joe Barry. I mean, he kind of he put it together this week. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold it together against CD Lamb and Dak, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean they got in, and I mean we've seen their highs and lows. So I mean, who knows what team shows up in Dallas, but it feels like they always do when they play Dallas in the
Yeah,
playoffs. But the most, I think, everyone's been talking about the coaching changes that's happened since Sunday. Now we've had Mike Vrabel gone, Pete Carroll today, no longer coach, he's an advisor. Arthur Smith gone. Um,
Ron
Matt
Rivera.
Ron Rivera gone, the Bears coach staying, but they fired their OC.
Yeah,
Am I missing any that happened since Sunday?
we
I
lost.
think,
Was it Wilk from the Giants? Their DC.
yeah, Giants DC. But I think the most surprising one, we saw this. I don't know if you watched this act, but Taylor Lewan was on the Rich Eisen show, and he was in the middle of talking about Michigan win the Natty. And as Mike Vrabel got fired, and he was like, who played the Titans first, he was like, "What are we doing?" He said that, like he said it that, and he heard this from inside the Titans organization. Their talent just wasn't good. Vrabel wasn't the problem, and I agree. I think Vrabel is a one of the best coaches in the NFL, in at least in the top 15, top half. I mean,
Oh,
maybe
certainly. Yeah.
probably top, yeah, probably top 10. And Tennessee, I think, is making a huge mistake in letting him go. Because I mean, I get that they're going through a whole rebuild. Because I mean, they basically traded everyone away. Derrick Henry's 99% out of the door. But I feel like you got to keep their coach if he's that good. And I mean, I think Vrabel's probably going to go to back to his team that he played for in New England, which you said the same thing. But I think that this Titans one was the most unexpected and and it was probably the dumbest decision. I think everything else was justified with Arthur Smith just being doesn't know how to use talent. Ron Rivera mid coach for the past 8 years, and then Pete Carroll is like 100, and Nick Saban just retired. But
Yeah.
wow, okay, coaching as it is,
Yeah.
but that's college. But Zach, what do you think about these changes?
Well, I actually think that Pete Carroll is like a really solid coach. I think that even with his age, I think that he brings something to the table. As much as I've talked uh crap on the Seahawks, this this entire season since I realized what was ahead of them. Um, I think that this is like an okay decision though. He is getting older, and I think the Schefter had made it clear that they do anticipate or at least hope to keep him on in some capacity, and um, and that's encouraging if you're a Seahawks fan. It could be helpful for the team to go get out more of a younger talent. I think that your assessment of where Vrabel goes is pretty accurate as well. New England seems like the better fit for him. Um, they're not looking for a Belichick necessarily there, but I think that the culture that they've built up there is more akin to what Vrabel would bring, and I think that he would be a good fit with a fresher new taste and would really be able to um, just cultivate that toughness again. I think that this Patriots team right now is still it's a tough team, even with or at least it's a tough defense. And getting Vrabel in would just give it I think a fresh breath of life. And I think that they should be excited. The Titans, I don't know. It seems like it all fell apart with the AJ Brown trade, um, because I don't know what happened, and it's really interesting how a trade like that can completely torpedo the entire front office. And looking back on that, I mean, it probably should have. That ended up. I saw something on TikTok, and I'm sorry that I can't credit the creator for this, but he had mentioned or he had brought up that with the new GM basically kind of being in like the Shanahan tree, or the area where we're kind of seeing these like McDaniels, McVays come in and kind of electrifying their teams. I think that that's what they're more so looking for, and Vrabel kind of brings this like even with him being like relatively young for a head coach, he has this like grizzledness about him, and he wants his teams to be tough instead of being like innovative. And I think that they want to move away from that. I think that's a bad decision. Um, but I think it kind of makes sense if you've already kind of moved in that direction with the new GM. So I think initially, like it could be worse, but it's still like you're losing a lot by getting rid of Vrabel, and I don't know if you're going to be able to replicate that. And it's probably more likely that you don't. Um, but yeah, I don't know what happens with Atlanta, but genuinely anyone with a fundamental knowledge of football and just doing something that just bringing some sort of orthodoxy to that team, potentially maybe giving Bijan Robinson the ball more than 15 times a game.
Or
Uh,
Kyle Pitts or
yeah, or
any one of
yes,
their talent players.
right. Um, would you probably start to do a little bit better than Arthur Smith, the mad scientist. Um, so fortunately, like I don't want to rejoice in him losing his job or anything like that. Like that he has a family and everything. That's really sad. But like as a team, I think the team will be better now Arthur Smith is gone. Let's say that. And I will say about the Seahawks, um, I need to take my victory lap, and I will do that because they're not in the playoffs and they don't affect me anymore. But I no longer have to wear this, and that's because the regular season is over. I've already paid my dues. I've done my time, and
And you
and
were
I
right.
was right. They didn't make the playoffs. They they failed. They couldn't depend on who they needed to depend on to get in, and they weren't in charge of their destiny, which I didn't think would happen. I didn't think it would secure anything. I didn't think that they would even come close. They started to scare me a little bit down the stretch, but I won. This is my triumphant raising the jersey that I was forced to wear these past 3 weeks. So that's all I think. I think it's all we have to say about the coaches. Why don't we move on to our next and more important wild card games of the week?
Super wild card weekend. And boy, does it start off good. Now, I'm going to give Zach to speak. And Zach, I want you to talk about, because if audience doesn't know, Zach will be gone these next 2 weeks as he's going on a mission trip across the world to Cambodia. So he will not be on this pod till after the AFC Championship. So I want you to, because Browns is your team. I think you deserve your credit to talk about them. Talk about this matchup and talk about what you want to see from the Browns in this playoff run and how far you think they'll go. I want you to cover all those three because I think you deserve time to talk about all of them.
Okay, so I would say, or at least I'll preface this with, I think that this Cleveland team is the healthiest it's been in a really long time. We saw Okoronkwo push through a torn pec to finally come back up against the Bengals, which didn't end up being anything. It was like it felt like a scrimmage because we played Jeff Driscoll, which was like absolutely awful. Who, by the way, is our backup quarterback, and I hope to God I don't see him again. But it was good to see him back. It was good to have him involved. We just had Grant Delpit get activated today. We also had Juan Thornhill return. Amari Cooper is healthy. We had Greg Newsome practice again, and then someone else was also practicing. But getting Grant
What
Delpit back.
about
Sorry.
what is EJ Moore playing, or is he still?
Oh, Elijah
Or
Moore.
no, Elijah Moore. Sorry, not EJ.
Elijah Moore was practicing, and I haven't heard it. Like last time I heard, I think it was yesterday, or the day before he was practicing, which is a good sign because I'm pretty sure you can't practice if you're still within concussion protocol. So my understanding is that he's no longer in concussion protocol, and um, he should be eligible to play. Though it seems like there are a couple people who are still out, including Dustin Hopkins, who's our kicker, who's just been electric this whole season, Pro Bowl snub. Um, Fortunately, we have another kicker who I think will hopefully be able to just stand up to the task. Um, we are missing Cedric Tillman, who's on a concussion protocol, and he has shown some sparks, but I think it'll be okay. Maybe he can make it this week. You don't need to hear about the injury report, though. You want to know where I think his team is going. I think we're healthy. I think that we're actually going to be able to stack up against these Houston wide receivers. I think we can handle the rushing attack, and I think Myles Garrett is going to be electric. I don't think that he comes into the playoffs and just puts a goose egg up. I have faith in him, and I have faith really in this team that they're going to get to Stroud, um, even with him just being able to work his magic. Uh, and I think we will win this game. I don't think it'll be pretty. I don't think it's going to be super dominant like it was the first time. But I think that Joe Flacco, even with a couple turnovers, will be able to win this game. Um, some people have said potentially not with the way this offense has been going, but I think that the weakest aspect of this matchup is the Houston defense, and particularly the Houston secondary. So I think that they're going to be able to figure this out. Um, this is the weird part because whoever the lowest seed after that plays Baltimore, and I don't want to play Baltimore. I would love to stay away from them, which I think there's actually a chance that that actually happens. I think that it's possible that we do stay away from them. Um, I actually wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh beat Buffalo. Um, just I think it could be tough. I could see it happening, and I also think that the Dolphins could beat the Chiefs, so they could be the ones who go in above us, and we end up going against uh like in the event we would either play like Buffalo or Kansas City, and I think I like that matchup more. So I think we could get to the AFC Championship, and it would get pretty rough from there. But like this is what I don't want to see. I don't want to get to the Super Bowl and have it be Browns Niners or Browns Rams. Because I actually think we could manage Dallas. But there's this toughness about the Rams team and obviously the Niners that I just don't want to see them. They're like they freak me out, and I think that we could get to that point, but I just don't want to see that. The way I see it, I think we could genuinely contend with everyone in the AFC. I get a little bit freaked out when I see those two teams in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna be here, so I'm gonna be on the show next week. So I'm gonna mainly focus on this game.
Mm-hmm.
Um two things. I The Browns won 36-22 without one, but they were up 36-7, and then I mean it was just garbage time touchdowns.
We also did
So it's
pull the
more
starters.
yes,
Yeah,
and C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson I don't remember if Nico Collins was playing. He may have was out, and that plays a factor. But I don't know how big of a factor. But the other thing is I don't know how this Browns team will react if Joe Flacco is not if he has a really bad game. We saw what happened with Jake Browning, and we saw what has happened with all these other backup quarterbacks play, and they've had at least had a couple. Joe Flacco really hasn't. Even though he's thrown bad interceptions, he's still been thrown for like 300-400 yards. We haven't seen an 100-yard can barely complete a pass game, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but if, I don't know what's going to happen if it does. But I think you guys have the defense, and you guys have an X factor on defense named Myles Garrett this week. So I do think you get it done in Houston because I feel like Houston's a little bit lacking on the defensive end. They're a great defense, but they're not the greatest. And I think Joe Flacco will be able, and Amari Cooper, that connection will go off again. And I think the Browns win a one possession close game, like you said. But I can't stress enough like how like I'm like as a just NFL fan, just looking at this non-biased opinion, I'm concerned what happens if Joe Flacco does not have a good game.
yeah,
Because
everyone is concerned about that. That's I tell you, if I see Jeff Driscoll walking out, I think I'm turning off the TV and I'm gonna be on a plane when I'm watching this game. I'm gonna find a way to jump out because I I can't manage it. I can't do it. If I have to see him like it's wrap. It's a wrap. Um,
yeah,
yeah. Did you have anything to say else about that?
I do think the Browns will get it done this week.
Yeah.
I do, and I think as much I don't want to say I'm a Bengals fan, and we obviously have a rivalry, but at the end of the day, you got to give them respect. And I think you will win this game, even though it is in Houston.
I do, yeah,
Now,
I do understand the tendency to be concerned about Flacco because he is a backup quarterback, and we've seen the Cinderella story over and over again over the course of the season. It was Josh Dobbs, and then it was Tommy DeVito, and then it was Jake Browning, and then it was Gardner Minshew for a while, and then it was Joe
It was Drew
Flacco,
Lock.
and it was Drew. Yes, it was Drew Lock, and then it was Joe Flacco. And the thing about that is, all those stories ended. They all ended, and it ended up being just misery for the Vikings, certainly. Um, and it makes sense to be concerned about that for Joe Flacco. I just don't think that it happens this week. I think it happens when you face a tougher defense and
Yeah,
he's forced to make he's a little bit more under duress. If that does happen, because obviously I don't want that to happen. And I'm not trying to talk disrespect on the Texans. I love this team. I really, really like this team. And if they weren't playing the Browns and they got knocked and we got knocked out, um, I would root for them the rest of the season. And now I'm probably not going to do that if they beat us because I'm going to have like hate in my stomach. But it's like I really do like this team. I just don't necessarily think that they're going to be the one who provoke Flacco's stinker. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I think that's
There's
it.
one more thing I want to say on the Flacco situation. Out of all the QBs listed, Joe Flacco has been a starter in the league and he has been a Super Bowl MVP. So at least like that, I that is different from everyone else. So
Yeah,
we'll see. But I think moving on to a really interesting game for me is Dolphins at Chiefs. Now it's gonna be -50 out there, but this we've seen what I think the Dolphins have a at least with Ramsey and everything, they have a great secondary.
yeah,
I think it may have been let down at times, but it is very good. And we saw them play in Germany, and it was more of a defensive battle than everyone thought. And but then we saw what the Raiders were able to do when they locked up this Chiefs offense for 2 to 3 quarters. And I actually see the Dolphins doing that. And I don't think the Chiefs honestly are going to be able to keep up with this Dolphins team. I Yes, Tyreek Hill dropped catches that he should have caught, but everyone's forgetting that like his ankle is garbage right now. Like he's in a walking boot, and I think it's going to get better week by week. And they got Jalen Waddle, they have Mostert, they have A Chain, they have Tua, and I think this Dolphins team goes into Arrowhead and gets the job done in Kansas City in a close one because I mean Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and as much as we don't like him, he is probably the best quarterback in the NFL right now. That's an argument to be like most people would think that, but I do think this Dolphins defense is a defense that can shut down this Chiefs team, especially with lacking receivers and Travis Kelce not been on his A game recently.
yeah. This is really hard because it's almost like part of me part of me understands the fact that Arrowhead has the effect that Arrowhead has on the opposing team, and the Dolphins are so used to playing in situations where their matchup is favorable. They're in great weather basically all of the year. And then off like there's that classic like home advantage because they literally have a stadium where the opposing team has to deal with sun beating down on them the entire game. Well, really until like the second half. In that point, you're already cooked. Um, so I'm interested in the way that um affects the way that they play going into Kansas City. It's really hard though because I feel like this is one of the most difficult teams or like matchups to evaluate because we all know that the Kansas City wide receivers are just awful. Like Marcus Valdes-Scantling has basic. I think he must have an incentive in his contract for the amount of to drop like over 30 balls, especially when they count, because he does. And I'm a little bit concerned about that, or I'm a lot of bit concerned about that going against this really competent um, Miami defense. And the only strength that the Kansas City offense, other than Patrick Mahomes, have is that of Pacheco and the rest of that running back room. But Miami matches that. They're able to put up Mostert. You can bring in Achan. Really, any of these guys can compete with the people with the HBs in Kansas City. Um, but part of me just feels like it feels like this is where they make it right. against this Miami team who has been on the downward trajectory over the course of these past couple of weeks. Everyone seems to be injured. I think they're down to their third edge rusher, or anything like, which makes me concerned that they're not going to be able to get to Mahomes and he's going to be able to make something happen, even with relatively incompetent receivers. I think just being in the home environment and the fact that Miami is so injured, it's going to affect this game, and I think that Kansas City does get this job done. But like you said, I could see this going anyway. I think Tyreek Hill will probably have a better game than he has recently because he's probably I think it was something like in his drop passes alone it was like he's dropped like four touchdowns and like it was up there in terms of like I think it was just below 1,000 yards in drops with the amount of drops he's had this season or something like that, and he's been trying to go to like he's
Yeah.
been trying to break the record, and he probably would have broken it by now had he not been had all these drops. Granted, it's an injury concern; you can't really avoid those. So I could see this. I could see anything happening, but if I had to put money on it, I would put it on Kansas.
Yeah, and it's not gonna be an easy job for Miami. I just think they have the team to get it done. And I'm a fan of this Miami offense. So, but I mean, again, going into Arrowhead is hard. So this is definitely it's not gonna be a cakewalk for sure. And I think the Chiefs didn't were rooting for Miami on Sunday because I don't think they did not want this. They would much rather play the Steelers than the Dolphins. Because
Yeah,
I mean, the Steelers definitely don't have a chance against the Chiefs, but and the Dolphins, I think this is really as close as it can get for a wild card with these two teams. But
mhm.
speaking of Steelers Bills, so we've seen the Steelers make the wild card the past couple years, excluding last year, and they have stunk. And I think they do it again, especially with TJ Watt out. Mason Rudolph isn't like anything special, and this Bills defense has been playing well, even though the offense has not. And I think this is going to be a Bills offense showcase of where they start to get things together, and we don't see Josh Allen throw three interceptions, and we see a Bills rout in Buffalo. I think they blow out the Steelers.
I think that that's one of two options. I think, um, and both of them end up being Bills wins. But I think there's a situation in which they shift into playoff mode and they're able to actually um like Josh Allen is going to be activated. He's going to not throw these costly picks. He's not going to make these costly like fumbles and turnovers and not necessarily needing to force anything and just is okay relying on the pace that they can set. I think that they've also forgotten that James Cook has been relatively productive, so it would be interesting to see him getting involved. Um, the other situation that can happen is I can actually see this being a fight. I see Jalen Warren really putting up some concerning numbers against the Buffalo defense. And I think Mason Rudolph is competent just enough to keep them within this game. And I think that we know Mike Tomlin and we know his ways. And now, granted, that hasn't that hasn't materialized in any playoff success in what is it, decades now, or a decade. So it's like that is something that you do have to consider that like he is lauded for his regular season success. So we don't know what that looks like going into this game, but I actually think Buffalo will win this, but I can see two things happening. I can see it being super close and it being a slug out and it being like every other Buffalo win these past couple weeks. Or I can see it like what you mentioned and having him finally put it together and finally um asserting that Josh Allen is a force to be reckoned with here in the playoffs. Um, but I do in the end think that it will be a Buffalo win, regardless of the way it looks.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I agree as well because Mike, this Steelers team, I mean, we've seen this before. We saw this. They went to Kansas City 2 years ago and got pooped on. So I think I don't see this going well for the Steelers. But I mean, Josh Allen may not show up until next week, knowing that. So who knows? But Packers Cowboys is a lot. The 2-7 matchup in the NFC is a lot more interesting because I feel like the Packers have a better shot of winning this game. because but the key matchup is the Cowboys offense versus the Packers defense, and can the Packers defense get stops? Now, I think Jair Alexander versus CeeDee Lamb will be very interesting, and there'll be a very highly competitive matchup. My concern is what about the other Cowboys weapons? They got Jake Ferguson, Pollard, they got other receivers. So, and obviously Prescott and his legs. And as even though the Packers have won these games in the past in AT&T, I think the Cowboys will not or the Packers will not be able to stop the Cowboys enough times. I don't think I see this Cowboys offense getting beating this defense too many times, whether it's long throws or in the run game. And I think the Cowboys win maybe in the 10 to 14 range where it feels close, but the Cowboys are in control the whole game. I think that's how this game ends up playing out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Jordan Love has had a great run, and I'm not going to say like it ends here or anything like because I think that it is still going to be a good game. Like, and not in the sense that it's going to be competitive, but I think that he's not going to play particularly awful. Even going up against a what can we call this defense? Top three, top four. Um, I put him and probably put him up there like top four, top five.
Yeah.
Um, I think that they have the facilities to goad him into some interceptions. Um, now I don't like Pollard. I don't like him, but I do like the way he performed. I do like the idea of him against a Joe Barry led defense. That you do have a point. The Jair Alexander CeeDee Lamb combo is really interesting because Jair is up there with the top one of the top cornerbacks of the league. And really the only reason you know who he is, and it's not good to be known as a cornerback because that likely means you're getting shredded. And unless you're
Yeah.
unless you're bland and you're getting like a billion interceptions every game, you're breaking the interception record. Um, we know him because of both of them have pretty um like firecracker personality, so it's going to be really interesting to see them up against each other. Um, but I do think it's a fight that CD wins, and like you like you said, I think I agree on the margin as well. I think it's going to be like in the 10 to 14 range, and I don't think this is going to be like a super eventful game per se. I think it's just going to be one where the Dallas figures it out kind of early and just continues to pour it on slowly as the game continues. So um, yeah, that's where I'm at with that one. And I think that this is probably like they probably have a better chance of beating Dallas, but I think that this game will be less eventful. I I can see it being more of a steady game than like a like a Pittsburgh Buffalo or anything like that. Um, I can see like we talked about how it's going to be completely volatile in one direction where it's like super close. There's going to be completely volatile and like they get completely blown out. I can see this being like a mid-range, just like good old-fashioned Dallas win.
Yeah. And but at the end of the day, there is a way the Packers can win this
Yeah.
game. But I think it would have to be a low scoring affair for the Packers to win.
Hmm.
I think their defense would have to show up, and with how they've played sometimes, I don't know. But I think we both agree the Cowboys are going to win that game. I think this is the Rams Lions. Now, I love this matchup. I'm I'm like my dad's a Lions fan, so I'm close. Like I know what's gone on in Detroit, even though they've stunk. But and Matthew Stafford coming back to Detroit. I mean, like, what are the odds, man? This is like the Jared Goff versus LA, Stafford versus Detroit, Dan Campbell versus McVay. Man, this is going to be an entertaining game and a close one too. And I've been like, I going into today, I was like, oh yeah, the Lions got this. But then I got thinking that Lions don't have the greatest defense. Their defense has lacked at some points during this year, and the Rams are rolling. They are rolling. But I think this environment in Detroit is going to be very good. And I think the Lions, I feel like they play a lot better at home. I've got that felt, even though I don't, have they lost at home? They lost to the Packers. I know that. And other than
I
that,
think the win
I don't think that.
against yeah, no, the loss to Dallas was in Dallas.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's the only loss they have at home.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
I just think this Lions team gets it done. I do. I think they find a way. I don't like there's no way I see them blowing them out, but I think the Lions they may trail most of this game and find a way in the end. I just believe in Dan Campbell. I think he's an exceptional coach, and I got faith in the Lions, believe it or not. And the refs may try to screw them over like they always do. I mean, there's a 20-minute long YouTube video, Lions versus the refs, and it's pretty funny. But I think the Lions get this job done. But this the Rams can easily win this game as well. Like this is a true 50-50 matchup for me.
yeah, I think that this is probably the best game of the week. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I think Cleveland Houston is probably like second because I think that Cleveland does have a bit of an edge. Um, like I think it's like the smallest edge, but it's there. I can see it. Like there are Houston has a like a veteran like sorry Cleveland has like a veteran status to it now with Joe Flacco, and then you also have people who have been to Super Bowls. Um, in that of like Juan Thornhill on the defense who's able to, and he hasn't been super productive during the season, but I think it's just that sort of veteran um presence is something to like this is where it starts to pay off, and it starts to pay off a lot more than it would in the regular season because the threat isn't as big. But but now that um we are in the playoffs, I think that's more important. Now let's move on to Rams Detroit. I like I said, I think this is the best game of the week, and I actually think that the Rams will win this one. I hope to the Lord above that the Lions do take them out. Because I don't like this is the team that I'm the most like team and the Niners obviously is the team I'm the most scared of. Um, I don't want to see them, and with the way that Stafford has been throwing recently, I think it's kind of flown under the radar because he's been amazing. And then
Yes.
when you put that up against a defense as lauded as it is, and it's been able to put pressure on um, some of the more secure and competent quarterbacks here in the league. I think that they're actually going to be able to get to Goff, and I don't think it'll be as miserable as it was in on Thanksgiving when they played against the Packers. And you just saw Goff looked like a deer in headlights, man. He looked like he couldn't string anything together, and then put on top of that, he had like three fumbles. And I think that this is an incredibly competent defense, and I think that they're going to be able to get a Goff, or they're at least going to be able to shake them up, and they're going to be able to give it right back to them on offense as well with Puka Nacua, which is weird because he's like more of a threat now than Cooper Kupp, um, which is you wouldn't if you told me that by the end of the season, I don't think anyone would believe you. I think the odds on that, I think you would like multiply your money by 10 if that if that were the now, granted, he was coming off a hamstring injury, but that's besides the point. I just think that on both sides of the ball, they're more equipped, and I don't think it's gonna be like a ref situation where they're gonna get screwed over again like that. But I think that um, as like both of these guys have amazing coaches. Like Dan Campbell's great. He's wretched this team from uh, really from being awful, and I can say that as a Browns fan. And but you also have Sean McVay on the other side of it as well, and I think that Dan Campbell can kind of get in his own way sometimes. And if they do lose against the Rams, um, I can see a world when he does get in his way and he still loses, in a world where the Rams are just so good that he coaches a perfect game and he still loses. But I'm really
Yeah.
excited for this, and I could see it going either way. But I'm putting my money on the Rams.
Yeah, there's two final notes I want to sink in real quick.
Mhm.
One, it looks like CJ Gardner Johnson's back, which is huge for the Lions. Huge. I feel like he is a player that can help lock down these defenders. And the second thing is the blueprint to stop this Detroit offense is to get to Jared Goff. And you put on Jared Goff when in a clean pocket, one of the best passes in the NFL. It's when he starts to suck is when he gets forced to move around or they get to him and then he fumbles a billion times. So I think the Rams easily have the D line to do this. They got to get to Staff or not Stafford Goff to be able to win this game. Goff would throw all over you if you just let him see in the pocket. You saw it against multiple teams this year, and you saw it in the final minute in Dallas where they just dropped everyone and he picked them apart. So that's the blueprint. But I still think the Lions will be able to get this job done. I think I don't think they'll be denied. I think they're too strong of a force for this Rams team. But I mean, this is like you said, this is very easily the game of the week. But moving on to the final one, which uh, is very interesting, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I had one of my close friends is an Eagles fan, and he does not know what's happened to this Eagles team against a Bucks team that, I mean, they won a lacking NFC South, but I feel like this was the best team in the NFC South, and they I think they still would have made the wild card if they did not let's say there was a 10-7. Actually, never mind. That's thought stupid. But the Bucks are respectable. They're a respectable playoff team, even though the NFC South was very awful this year. I feel like this team can win. They can very easily win this game. Do I think so? No. Do I? But they can. I just think there is no way the Eagles have this many weapons for them to lose this game. They have too many weapons. They got DeAndre Swift, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I don't know if Goddard's back. I don't think so. But and they got Jalen Hurts, and then they got this amazing offensive line. And on the defensive end, they have Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. Uh, He's still there, right?
Yes.
I'm remembering that correctly. And then I don't I think there's someone else. I can't think for some reason on the top of my head. And they got Slay still. I think this Eagles team is better than the way they've been playing. And the real question is which Eagles team shows up, and I think the good one will show up on Monday night. And I think I've said all year the Bucks have a great defense, and Baker's been a game manager, and that's what they've needed him to be. I think I think this is where the Bucks run ends. So it won't be as bad as last year where they got annihilated by the Cowboys, even though Brett Maher missed 6,000 extra points. I think they will be able to hold their own for a little bit, but I think this Eagles veteran team is just going to be too powerful for them, and they'll get the job done.
Yeah, I completely see the reasoning behind that. It's like when you're looking at this, it's kind of like, all right, are we really like, do you really actually think that the Eagles are going to lose to the Buccaneers, who like just barely made it out of the AFC South with the way that they were playing recently, and they didn't even look that great against the Dolphins? To which I would answer yes. I actually think that the Buccaneers are going to beat the Eagles, and you know how I was talking about how the Chiefs are going to get it together and figure it out at Arrowhead. I think this is the team that messes it up. I think that with the way that it, both coordinators really have been struggling, um, and the way that this offense seems to just be full of ineptitude in such a way that it's true. Like you're completely right. They have all of these weapons and these veterans, but you can't get the ball to them. And we have no idea what Jalen Hurts' finger situation is going to be like, because that's his throwing hand as well, which is a big aspect of this as well. I think that DeAndre Swift has kind of taken a step back, and some of the criticism that he received prior to his departure from the Lions has kind of cropped up again. I think um, and I think that's deserving. But then also, it's like even some of the decisions that they've made um, on defense have been really bad, and that goes right back to Nick Sirianni and deciding to put Matt Patricia in charge of it, and then also the Bayard trade not necessarily panning out in the way that you would think it would. Um, as much as this Buccaneers team has things to be desired, I think the only tried and true sector of this game is that Buccaneers defense, and I think it's something like the Buccaneers have two 1,000 yard receiver 1,000 yard consecutive. I think it's like 3 or 4 years where the Buccaneers have had consecutive uh two receivers on. I'm really struggling to put this together. 4 consecutive years where they've had two wide receivers put up over 1,000 yards. Period, and that can be found in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I think that When you have those two components on the field, you shouldn't write them off, especially when you can't even get the ball to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Um, Baker can get the ball to Mike Evans. He can get the ball to Chris Godwin, and their defense has it figured out. I just don't think that the Eagles have anything figured out right now, and I think this is where their run ends.
Yeah. This game is very interesting, and I think Eagles just have too many veterans to let this down. But the Bucks have a chance, unlike last year when many people. I mean, they didn't have a chance last year.
Yeah.
They're like I said, they're a respectable team and they can get the job done. But I mean, I think this Eagles team is going to have to show up at some point again.
Hmm.
But I mean, wild card weekend, it's going to be a great weekend of football. It always is. Zach, any last messages to say? I mean, this is your final voice for 2 weeks, and then you'll be back.
Yeah. Hopefully when I return, I'm a happy man and my team is still in the running. Um, eh, I have nothing else to say other than that. And I hope that this team doesn't let me down because I'm not going to say that this feels like the year, but I think we can go toe to toe with anyone we see. And I hope it just doesn't end on some bull crap, some stupid fumble out of the end zone like against the Chiefs, some and I'm hoping more for our win against the Steelers in our first round of the playoffs than that situation. And if I see that again, I'm gonna come back grizzled, angry, and depressed. So hopefully that's what I don't look like next time you see me.
Well, yeah, thanks for sticking with us in, and Andy will be on here most likely next week with me, breaking down these games and picking divisional. Yeah, we'll see y'all next week. Yeah, have a good week.
See you when I'm back. Bye.
Yep, peace.